So welcome to Benny's Designs. This is a live stream, live peoples. It's recorded for Ustream.tv and also for YouTube for people to watch at their leisure. I've decided to have a bit of a play. I'm going to use this book in my Art Rage digital bright colours. But because the pages are really nice and thin, I thought they would do quite well with pastels, and I had them out today, and I haven't had these out for a while, so I forgot how nice they were to work with. So I'm using my Derwent pastel pencils. Now I am using the vintage set, but most of those colours are available in the new set of 72, but they're just called different names. So I'm using dark violet, F and B, so I would think that's a pale violet and that's a dark violet, but you may find them called different names. I think I did a comparison quite a few months back. So working on a shiny page, you've got to really grind this colour in, because we don't have a tooth like you do on traditional pastel paper. So you just need a little bit of a scratch of colour. And I am actually using a Royal Sovereign clay shaper, and it's extra firm, and it's a chisel cup. Now I like the round ones, but this happens to be chisel, and unfortunately this is what I've got to work with today. So I'll zoom in a bit and then you can see. Put a little bit of colour on his face to warm him up a bit, and then I'm just doing the butterflies. So I've scratched the colour in. I haven't cleaned this tool. It's got purple on it, so if you look, that purple is a different colour, because by the time you've blended that pale one together and the dark one, so you've really got to grind that in, because there's no tooth on this paper, it's just shiny. And then when you go back with the dark, you can just manipulate it to where you want it, and it's not going to move very much. Now you could do with a piece of tracing paper or greaseproof paper before you've set it, and I intend to set this with a damp brush. So I haven't wasted a lot of colour, and I'm doing all the butterflies the same. I'm just using a light and a dark violet, so where there's cross hatching and lines drawn and it appears to be dark, that's where I'm putting this particular colour, and then I'm putting the other one everywhere else, and I'm gently stroking it. I don't want a lot of dust, because dust is pigment, and I need my pigment on the page and not. Now I really should have cleaned that, so a baby wipe, and then use your fingers, and then make sure it's dry, and then when you touch that pale one, it's not going to be contaminated like the other one was. I mean, it's fine, it's the colours, but I quite like the idea that this one wasn't contaminated with the different colours. You could bring that purple into there quite nicely. Got to be a bit careful putting your hand on these, because although they're ground in, they're not set. This colour will move. So this is how I did the Hagrid's page, but I did a lot of colour matching, so from a photograph, to get a kind of a realistic effect if I could. There's another butterfly, and it's a really easy way to work is this, so just scratching where it's pale and then where it's a bit darker. You can just put a bit of dark in, and then you'll find, don't forget to clean the tool, dry it, and you'll find it should behave itself and smush about. And again, you see, because you've got a neat edge on here, you can kind of really grind that in. Oh, I can't believe this. Right. Sorry about that. So grind that into there. Now I quite like that darker blue that I made earlier. It's a mixture of the two because we've got that darker shadow on that side of the wing. So it's given quite a natural darker shadow. And then we've got one last little one to do. So again, it's a fairly quick way to work. You've just got to be a bit careful that, you know, it's not set, but I'll show you how to set that in a second. So again, baby wipe. Make sure it's dry because we don't want a wet baby wipe, a wet brush. We want it dry. And again, it's really easy to work like this, especially if you've got pulley hands. The pastel behaves itself quite nicely. And it's a grayscale, so it works really well. So we want a fawn colour for the bodies, and I'm just scratching a little bit on the body, each one. Oops, I found another butterfly hiding up there. That one in there. It's always good to work in the direction with your wrist that you're going in, so you're not kind of squidging around too much. And you'll find that these pastels are so soft and there's not too much colour there. There's just enough for that page to grab. Any more and it would be dust that you'd have to blow away and it would be down the drain. Whereas I like the fact that every little scrap of colour that comes off my paintbrushes and my pencils and my crayons ends up on my page. So I quite like those. Again, clean that for next time. And I need an orange, I think would be quite good. Or what's blue and orange? Purple. I always get them the wrong way around. I think I'm going to do this really pale yellows, I think. I kind of like this colour, so that's in the middle. Now it's a grayscale, so you could put colour all over and it would be the same. Just wonder if that's a petal. It should be a petal, but it doesn't look like a petal. This is the nature of grayscale. So you could put white if you didn't have a paler version, or if you wanted a really big contrast. White would give you a really nice highlight. So we've got a clean tool and we'll rub that in and see what it does. Now, because I was doing another page earlier, I took out my colours. I think I might actually want a little bit of peachness in there, I think. And again, because I've now got too much colour on there, you can see I've got dust. And I don't want dust, so I think that peach is just warming up a bit. A nice bit of contrast there. And it's got to be an easy thing because there's no tooth to this paper. So, you know, this, if you don't grind this dust pigment in, it's going to be blown away. It's going to go. So I kind of like that one. So we'll go with the one behind. I think I do like this peach. Orange Earth, actually, it's called. Literally tiniest little bit because we don't want too much. Just on the highlightsy bits. And I'm not going to set this with hairspray or fixative. I'm going to set it with a very, very barely damp rigger. So I quite like those colours. And then right down here we have another flower. So put a bit of this. It's a fairly quick way to work, there's no mess. Pastels are a bit messy, but because these are pencils, you don't have the mess you would have. And all that dust or pigment that we're scratching out is going to be ground into that page. And because they're not too bad in contrast, I'm not cleaning the little tool. If it was a dark purple or vivid pink, it would contaminate the others, but because this is just a very soft yellow and peach, it's not going to bother too much. And again, I've not blown ones, tiny specks of dust maybe, but most of it's on the page. So the best way to set them is with a damp baby wipe and I think I've just put that paintbrush away. I prefer the number 3 rigger. Which I didn't put away. I used it earlier because it worked really well. I just want to put it away. Let's have a look. Yes, I did. I thought I had. I like riggers. I buy them in 3s. So it looks like this. Fluffy. Split. Dry. Wet it. Twist it to a point on a baby wipe and then very carefully just, you can see the dampness hitting it, and then about 5 seconds later it's dry. And that means you don't get any buckles, but every scrap of that pigment is now fixed. So I'm just going to do the bottom ones. So damp rigger, twist. You can just see as your paintbrush goes over a dampness, and then instantly it dries. So I'm going to call that 10-second dampness, but it's more like 4. And sometimes what you can see, you think it's the colour that's changing, but it isn't. What's changing, you can see the lines underneath. You want the brush barely damp. If you put it on wet, this is thin paper, you will get buckle. But if you do it barely damp, and stroke the surface once, you will instantly turn all that pigment to kind of a fake watercolour, which then dries. And when your baby wipe gets wet enough, you don't actually need to go back into water because it's quite damp as this baby wipe. I used it on the same project earlier. And sometimes you can see the dust particles where you've put a little bit more on. And the other thing you can do is you can actually, instead of blend, if you don't have a blending tool, that now is not a pastel anymore, it's a watercolour. Forgot the flower, see the flower here, I left a flower. So you can do it another way. You can scratch the colour in, so all this colour is just sitting on top. And you take, again, if you squeeze this, water would come out, so it's quite damp baby wipe. And this time you're manipulating it. You're making it into a watercolour and moving it about. You've just got to be a bit careful that you don't get too wet because you'll get a buckle. We don't want any buckling, we just want all that colour to change into a watercolour and dry. And again, that is now dried. It's not a pastel anymore. That one's not a pastel anymore. If your baby wipe gets too dry, you know it's time to dunk. You just want to barely get enough liquid on there and if you're not sure, the easiest thing is to dunk and then twist dry onto a baby wipe. And it's not going anywhere because it's ground in. You've ground it in if you do it this particular way. So it can't go anywhere. But what happens is your lines of the underneath drawing kind of are sharpened so you know where you've been. Because you can see the image a bit sharper. And again, it's now become a watercolour. And this technique is to dry any pastel. It tends blocks. Derwent watercolour, Derwent pencils, pastel pencils, and ordinary pastels. It can all work that way. So this is what I call fast and furious. It's very quick. So now my brush has absorbed quite a lot of water from all the dunks that I just have to now gently squeeze the brush through the layers of baby wipe, and I have a perfectly damp brush. Which will set. All these pages. And I have actually used an ordinary baby wipe when I was too poorly to get up to get some water. I've used a baby wipe and it's worked. So that's just how barely damp you need everything. So I think I've just got a little bit more up there. So I'll pan out a bit and you can see that it's all flat, and I didn't actually set his nose and his face, so I just do that with this, and you can see the lines come through, so you know you've done that bit. This is quite a damp baby wipe. And especially on a grayscale, all the blacks pop, so you know where you've been. think he's done now. Got a bit of a crinkle because I got a little bit wetter than normal, but because I've got some really nice bright colours, it was just his nose that I did twice and I shouldn't have done. But he'll dry. And not sure what I'm going to do with his hair actually. I think I might like it to leave him white, but I would like something in this background, so I think that's normally a dark blue. So we can blend that in. And then the trusty rigger. Oh, thank you, Suzanne. So I've got pastel pencils. These are derwent pastel pencils from Rexel. This is the vintage set, but they do the new set, and most of the colours you can match up. So it's, instead of using pastels, which are very soft, and you don't get your hands dirty. So I don't know if I like that particular colour now I've done it, but I'll just do it here. And so if anyone's got any questions, pop them in caps. I have been struggling to colour things the last few days, so now it's ground in. I'll just use that little brush. And stroke that across really quickly. And you can see it glisten, and then it's dried. Almost instantly you can see it darken, and it's dried. I think my camera's at a funny angle. It's probably slightly better. So it turned out better. Oh, thank you, Suzanne. It turned out better than I thought it would actually. But if you sprayed him outside with things, it would go a funny colour. So pastels are slightly better without. So I do have a lot of these pencils out at the moment. I'm not sure what I want to do with this beard actually. Not sure. I do have a grey. I've got a warm grey, and I've got French grey. I have a French grey. Let's see what that does. So again, I've got to take this blue off because that was blue. And keep the baby wipe away. So I don't think it really does a lot. I don't think I'm going to go in with a kind of a darker grey, I'm not sure. I could, I suppose, put a little bit of dark in there. It can give it a bit more form, but if it wasn't grayscale I would do it, but I don't know if there's too much difference. Because we've got to even him up now, haven't we? wants a little bit of a bit of colour in there, just a bit of colour. So this is a good way of working when you really know you have to be so careful with water, but you can still just about do it. You just can't throw a lot of water at it. And it's already blended. Now if it wasn't blended, you'd have to blend it light to dark, otherwise it will move. But because it's been blended, it's not going to move. And you normally can tell where you've been because it pops. The black lines come back out again. Done that bit. But the advantage of doing this is it makes a good contrast to blend. Just put this bit onto here. It's a little bit about 40 minutes, so you could do a page like this in about an hour. And that's what I would think a fairly quick page. Didn't blend under here. I love the Derwent pastel pencils, and remember they're the nearest thing to pure colour you can get. They have the least amount of pigment in them. So if you were playing with real pigments of colours, that's the consistency you would have, almost dust particles, because you grind the colours down to nothing, almost. There's a slight difference, I think, slight difference. We want it to be a bit more dramatic. We've been under here once, but you know, we can. I was best done that the next day, because as I said, once you do it and it's, oops, bring a hole in it, you see, shouldn't have done that. I should know not to do that. To be careful. So I can't wet that and dry that now. I have to dry it at a different time. Actually, it was the pencil that was a bit rough. I hadn't realised I've got a funny little kink in there. Hadn't realised that. But everywhere else should be fine. Just a little bit of a pastel. But again, word of warning, it's wet and it's paper. You've got to treat it with respect. Go over once, it works. Go over twice, you wreck it. So I kind of like this grey. It's French grey. It's just taking the edge off that white. And it's a little bit warm. Oops, a little bit. See, I'm rubbing on that bit now because I'd forgotten what I've done. So you can't rub back on it again because it will just disintegrate. But a soft brush stroked over it once would just about do it. So I quite like those colours. I didn't think I would. I've got a tiny bit of crinkle, but not much. And it's all set. And of course the pastel colours are really, really vibrant because they're pastel. So I've quite enjoyed my first page of Epic by Bennett Klein. Thanks for watching.